Hello again, Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here to talk some SEC baseball tournament action in the aftermath of 4 games on Thursday. We will tell you what was of note in those games, look ahead a little bit to some Friday and Saturday matchups, and we'll talk about every team here that played yesterday and unpack some implications for each. But before we do that, a reminder, our content brought to you by BetOnline. That's your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, the NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet online where the game starts. All right, I will start at the bracket at the top right corner or that area and then just kind of unpack these going down the bracket. What you had on Thursday, you had LSU advancing to Saturday's round. I guess that'd be the semifinals. So did Vanderbilt. LSU will play the winner of Kentucky and South Carolina. We'll talk about how they got there. And then in the bottom corner, Vanderbilt will await the winner of Friday night's Tennessee-Mississippi State game. But let's start with the LSU Tigers, who really have just played so well throughout this event. I said one reason I really like LSU is because of the pitching and the bullpen. Well, guess what? This is a good news, bad news scenario for the Tigers, I guess, if you want to look at it this way. The bad news is all the bullpen issues and pitching issues that people had held against LSU for a while that I said were getting better. Well, that kind of came unraveled on Thursday. Thatcher Hurd started for LSU, looked great for an inning or two. I guess an inning, then it just kind of fell apart. Nate Ackenhusen, who was one of the more dependable guys that LSU had last year, didn't pitch well coming in after him. Christian Little, who'd been so good lately, very talented kid, fell apart as South Carolina put together a rally and went ahead. Now, the back end, Justin Lower, Fidel Aloa, two guys that were a little lower on the pecking order. I guess that's the good news, is they gave LSU 4 1/3 innings of scoreless ball and finally held down the Gamecocks because, my goodness, this team has really been hitting in Hoover. And you usually don't see a player in an event named MVP of an event when his team doesn't win it or even, especially if he doesn't get to the title game. I wonder if you see an exemption here with Cole Messina, South Carolina's catcher, who's just been raking in Hoover. I think he's close to setting a tournament RBI record. He knocked in 6 on Thursday, and Carolina took the lead but just couldn't hold it. LSU got some runs late off Chris Veach. Michael Braswell had the walk-off hit just after South Carolina had a 1-run lead going into the ninth. But I think for LSU, maybe the better thing is I feel like the hitting, compared to the pitching the last few weeks, I feel like LSU's pitching's been a little bit better. Now, a lot of that is the two wonderful starters they've got at the top. Gage Jump has pitched so well in this event. Luke Holman had a no-hitter the other day. And the offense at times, Tommy White has really heated up, but it's not always been even. Jared Jones has had a good year. Hayden Travinski's hit a lot of bombs, but LSU has done some things. It's made some changes in their outfield here and there. Ashton Larson didn't have a good day yesterday, but he's been one of LSU's better hitters, I guess, over the last month. Jake Brown, talented center fielder. He's been off and on in the lineup. He was back in yesterday. He got 3 hits, knocked in a couple of runs. Stephen Milam, their second baseman, had 4 hits. Feel like he's had a nice tournament. So it was kind of a balanced effort for them. Tommy White goes 0 for 6 yesterday. You would not think in that scenario, if Tommy White does that, if the pitching just for the most part collapses with Hurd and Ackenhusen and Little all not pitching well, you would have said that's South Carolina's day. But it wasn't, because LSU's hitting was so balanced yesterday. So LSU, one of 2 teams that has clinched a berth in Saturday's semi. And by the way, from this point on, I think these teams just playing for pride, because I think both of them are going to be 2 seeds in next week's NCAA tournament. Would be surprised if either of them were seeded anywhere else. All right. LSU will await the winner of Kentucky and South Carolina. Let's talk about Kentucky. which was just awful in its opener against LSU when Luke Holman shut the Cats down. I guess any question about whether the Cats were going to go 2-Q got answered yesterday. They hit Agan Smith a little bit early, got 2 runs off him in 2 innings. Gage Wood came in after that. He gave up 4 runs in 2 2/3 innings. Will McIntyre pitched a third of an inning. He pitched better. I guess that's a little bit of a bright spot because he struggled lately. Brady Tigert in relief, gave up a run in an inning. So Kentucky just did to Arkansas what Kentucky's been doing to mostly everybody lately. That's get a ton of runners on base up and down the lineup. And the guy who led them again yesterday, and I think this guy is the most underrated player in the league. It's Ryan Waldschmidt, who seems like nobody's really gotten out much lately. He knocked in 3 runs, had a couple of hits. Kentucky scores 2 in the first, and then gets 1 in the fourth, 3 in the fifth, 3 in the seventh, and eliminates Arkansas by a 9-6 score. Other stars in that game, Devin Burks, their catcher, had a couple of hits. Emilian Petre, their second baseman, who's one of the better ones in the league, had a couple of hits. Waldschmidt had 2 home runs in this game. Ryan Nicholson, their first baseman, who's probably after Waldschmidt, it's either he or Nick Lopez or Nicky Lopez, as they usually call him, is their better hitter. But anyways, the guys at Kentucky needed to carry the offense, did it. As for the pitching, Trey Pooser had been a little uneven at times lately, and certainly not as good as he was the first 2.5 months of the season, but he gives Kentucky 5 scoreless innings, and Evan Byers comes on to close it out with an inning and a third, giving up 1 run. I'm still a little concerned about Kentucky's bullpen, but look, these guys are really hitting the ball as they have all year, and when you're that tough to pitch to with your lineup, when you foul off balls, when you take walks, when you do all the stuff that Nick Mingione's club does, that makes you tough. All right, what are we looking at going forward? Arkansas obviously going home. It can rest its pitching a little bit, which has not been at the level that Arkansas pitched earlier in the year. Now, look, I still think this might be the best pitching staff in the country, but you've seen some guys for the Hogs struggle lately. We'll see. Dave Van Horn is a master at getting his team prepared for the NCAA tournament. My guess is this is going to be an Omaha team. And it's going to play 2 games in its park, right? Arkansas is, according to D1 Baseball, the number 5 national seed. I can't see the Hogs falling out of that national seed picture. So they'll go home and regroup and await whoever comes next in that. As for Kentucky kind of in a little bit of a battle with Tennessee maybe for that number 1 overall seed. I think your competition at this point, Arkansas is going to be out of it. Texas A&M with going 0-2 in this event, probably going to be out of the running for the number 1 overall seed. North Carolina could be there. But right now, D1 Baseball has got Kentucky as the number 1 seed in the tournament for next week, with Tennessee as the 2. Now, I got my case jumped a little bit by people for saying Kentucky looked like a decent bet for the number 1 overall seed. People saying, hey, why isn't it Tennessee? Well, look at the RPI metrics. I get that Tennessee beat Kentucky 2 out of 3 in its home, but look at everything in the RPI. Quad 1 wins, road record, strength of schedule. Kentucky leads Tennessee in pretty much every meaningful category. And so that's why when D1 Baseball did its bracket this morning, it's got Kentucky as the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, but a lot to be decided between now and Selection Monday. Anyway, the Wildcats will LSU will await the winner of Kentucky and South Carolina. I think Kentucky's pitching probably in better shape at this point than South Carolina's going into that one. All right, moving on to the bottom of the bracket. One of the games in the tournament that I thought could be one of the best in the tournament. And I was looking forward to seeing how this one turned out because these 2 teams, I think, in everybody's top 4 nationally, and these are 2 teams that not play during the regular season. That's Kentucky and Tennessee. And Tennessee kind of gets on a late run, gets 3 runs in the 7th inning, adds an insurance run in the 8th. I think that came on a Cal Stark home run and knocks off the Aggies, eliminates Texas A&M from Hoover. Now, that's a surprise. I had A&M to win the event. Didn't really need to. I mean, it might just have clinched a number 1 overall national seed, but the Aggies were not falling out of that mix. And so this one, I'm not going to say was irrelevant for A&M. You'd always like to get that number 1 or number 2 national seed and maybe get yourself a little better draw, presuming you win your regional and get to a super, but that did not happen. And I'm a little surprised. For the Aggies, Ryan Prager started. They only threw him 53 pitches, and then they went to Tanner Jones, who'd been starting a little later in the outing. He didn't pitch well. Josh Stewart, been one of their better lower volume relievers, didn't pitch well. As for Tennessee, it did pitch well. Chris Stamos, their transfer starter, really more of an opener from Cal. He gave his longest inning, I think, of his career, his longest outing of his career. He goes 3 1/3, gave up 1 run. A.J. Causey, who's kind of their starter / jumbo reliever. That really doesn't matter because when A.J. Causey comes in a game, unless he's just getting hit, which happens some, but more often than not, he was effective. He's going to go a while, and that's what happened. After Stamos gives him 3 1/3, Causey goes 4 innings, gives up 2 runs, strikes out 7. Kirby Connell comes in to finish it up. None of those guys were electric. They gave up 9 hits. They struck out 12. They walked 3. But that's a really good outing against this Texas A&M team, which I think is a top 3 or 4 hitting club in America pretty easily. As for the Vols, Kavares, Tears, Cal Stark each hit home runs. Again, the Vols kind of poured it on later in the game and broke that one open. As for Tennessee, they will get a matchup with Mississippi State. Pitching is going to be interesting because Mississippi State has used Durangelo St. John, Cal Steven, who those are their best 2 starting pitchers. Those 2 guys have gone. Brooks Auger's gone for State already. So I don't know what they'll do. Maybe Carson Liggins, somebody that. For Tennessee, the Vols threw a lot of guys in that loss to Vandy, but didn't throw most of them from any pitches. I would think that Nate Snead might be able to come back at some point this weekend, but I'm guessing this would probably be a Drew Beam game. And Drew Beam was probably going to be the best starting pitcher you see make an appearance from here on out the rest of the tournament. I could be forgetting somebody, but the Vols have got him in their back pocket, and I would think there's maybe a decent chance you see him against Mississippi State on Friday. All right, State is here because somebody finally cooled that team off. That was Vanderbilt. The Commodores weren't super effective offensively in terms of just over the course of the game. Durangelo St. John came in and just looked like he was going to set a world record strikeout performance. But he got a little tired. Later in the outing, the Commodores got him for a couple of runs, strung together a couple of base runners. Davis Diaz had a big hit in that one. As for Vandy, JD Thompson, who's been their best starter all year, that's an upset. Little lefty who's been very, very good for them lately, was good again last night. I think he gave them, 6 innings. They handed it off the bullpen. That was a little bit bulky. But the Commodores did some things to State. It did not really allow State to get in a groove. State couldn't really string a lot of hits together till the 9th inning and came up 1 or 2 hits short in that one. But St. John was terrific. That kid, to me, is a major league pitcher. He has gone away kind of from switch pitching. I think he went exclusively right-handed against Vandy, but Vandy just kind of found a way in this one. Diaz had the biggest hit of the game. They strung together some walks, some singles, some bunts, some sacrifice flies, and then Ryan Ginther came and closed that one out. So Vandy will play in the nightcap on Saturday night and await the winner of Tennessee-Mississippi State. Again, the Commodores got to that winner's bracket game because it has beaten both teams already. I believe Vanderbilt played both those teams. Yes, it did in a series. And now between that and the SEC tournament, Vanderbilt is 2-2 against both Tennessee and Mississippi State. So pretty interesting matchup, whoever the Commodores get on Saturday night. All right, wrapping up some loose ends here in terms of NCAA tournament stuff and hosting, because that's what everybody is talking about right now. I think I'm not going to say it's consensus because I haven't looked at all the brackets, but I think most people think the SEC is going to get 11 teams in the field of 64 next week. I think that the questionable one might be Florida, which has got an RPI of 29 as of Saturday morning, but Florida also played the number 1 strength of schedule in the country. It had 13 quad 1 wins. I think that's going to carry the day in the end. Now, you could see some bid steals or something crazy, but I think the SEC is going to get at least 10 teams in and probably 11. I mean, at this point, Vanderbilt has played its way in for sure. South Carolina, if there was much doubt, Gamecocks have done the same thing. LSU has certainly done it at this point. RPI of 24. Vandy's RPI, by the way, is 17. So the Commodores were maybe the most fringiest of bubble teams coming in, but that RPI being in the top 20 now and the KPI being 16, Vandy's going to be safely in the field. The question to me is going to be the hosting spots and the national seeds. Okay, we know Kentucky is going to get a national seed. We know Tennessee is going to get a national seed. We know Texas A&M and Arkansas are going to get national seeds. What is the pecking order of that? Again, I think the way Kentucky and Tennessee finished the tournament could maybe have something to do with that. I think if Tennessee wins this tournament, despite the RPI differences, maybe the committee could look out and say, hey, look, they tied with Kentucky for the title, but they took the Cats down in the regular season in Kentucky's ballpark. So they got the tie break there, and say maybe if Tennessee wins this tournament, then maybe you look at it and say Tennessee was your regular season champ. It won the tie break. It got the number one seed for the tournament. So I just told you earlier in the program all the reasons Kentucky would be the number one overall seed over Tennessee if it's between those two teams, and North Carolina, I presume, would be in that mix as well. I haven't really looked at the Tar Heels resume, given that we are an SEC channel and not an ACC channel, but that might be the scenario by which Tennessee can leapfrog everybody and get into the number one overall seed. The Vols, again, will have to beat Mississippi State on Friday night and then knock off Vandy in a rematch to get there. And then of course, get another one against, coming out of the top would be either LSU, South Carolina, or Kentucky. So we'll wait and see how that one turns out between Tennessee and Kentucky. For the pecking order for the national seeds, again, I think A&M will be there. Arkansas will be there. They'll just be behind those two teams, I'm pretty sure. Now, the question is, does Georgia get a national seed or just a host? I think D1 had Georgia as the number 8 overall seed coming into Friday. Again, going to have to be some scoreboard watching some other places to know you got some ACC teams probably in the mix for that spot. And I think Mississippi State's going to be the interesting one, because State and Tennessee both have some things to play for. State right now, according to D1 Baseball, would not be hosting. I think D1 had Mississippi State going to Terre Haute, Indiana to face Indiana State. Now, look, if Mississippi State beats Tennessee on Friday night, State's RPI, which is 21 right now, I think would move up a few spots. Maybe if it's 17, 18, that's within striking distance of hosting. And I think at that point, with the 17-13 conference record, with the KPI that right now is 11 and would probably move up another spot or two, I don't know. Tonight, the more I think about it, tonight might be important for some national seeding implications and some hosting implications, because I think if Tennessee wins, the Vols are probably in that mix for the number one overall seed. If they don't, if Kentucky wins, maybe that goes by the board. Mississippi State, would they win? Again, you have to watch other places, but I think that might come into play. Lose this one to Tennessee, and I think your chances are a lot less likely, but I wouldn't write them off. You never know what a committee is going to be thinking, and so we'll watch that closely. All right, we'll be back to recap more SEC baseball from the tournament. I'm already starting to do some prep work to look ahead towards the NCAA tournament next week, and maybe do some research on some teams that some SEC teams might face. So if you want to get our content, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, enable your notifications, and we'll be back with plenty more of that. I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.